Blog Talk Radio.
Horror enthusiasts and fans of things that go bump in the night, rejoice, as there is a new collection of creepy tales to keep your spine tingling and your blood running cold.
Oh my God. He's gonna kill me.
The brainchild of prolific author Yvonne-m. Welcome to Your Nightmare is an anthology of stories from a gifted batch of writers specializing in keeping you up at night. Whether you love gruesome tales of murder and mayhem, or you prefer quaint tales of scary happenings, welcome to Your Nightmare is sure to please the inner psychopath and whet even the most insatiable horror appetite. Welcome to Your Nightmare is available now on Amazon.com.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, believe it or not, it's Thursday night. I got up this morning thinking it was Friday, but then I have days and nights like that. That was my friend Chris Dunham, who runs my ads for me, and he was doing a piece of shameless promotion called Welcome to Your Nightmare. It is an anthology written by 32 authors between two books, Welcome to Your Nightmare and Satan's Holiday. And the beautiful thing is some of the authors of this anthology have never been published before. This was their first time, and I'm honored to say that they agreed to be in the anthology. Some of them, like my friend Nicholas Skabowski and Tom Fertrell, are pros at this. They've been doing it for a minute or two. And for those of you who are new to the show, this is Off the Chain. I am your host, Yvonne Mason. I got a little bit ahead of myself, but that's okay. I do that sometimes. And I want to say welcome and glad you're here. Y'all all know that I run my numbers every day because I'm like that. I have to know what's going on in my world. And this show is just, not only is it off the chain, ladies and gentlemen, but it's taken on its own life form. We are now over 20,000 listeners between the show itself, and we've almost reached 8,000 just on this show. I expect us to reach 8,000 listeners in the next week or so. And then when you add all the podcasts, we've gone over 20,000. So our next goal is 25,000. I have to give a shout-out to Australia because they are 75% of the listening base for Off the Chain here on Blog Talk Radio. I just love looking at that and seeing those guys listening to us. This show is based on the premise of helping independent succeed. And the reason I say independent is I am an independent author. I'm very proud of being an independent author because we do it on our own. We don't ask for anything. We just go and do our thing. And I was lucky enough to be part of the original indies out there that broke a glass ceiling that we were told we could not break. We've grown in numbers, and if you are looking for good reads and have not found any good reads, check out some independent authors because you're going to find some beautiful jewels out there. And one of them is my guest tonight. She's been on my show a couple of times. She and I have grown very fond of each other, even though we haven't met. But we have decided that fondness and friendship and love knows no distance nor boundaries. And she has been so busy. I'm so proud of her. I cannot say enough how proud I am of her and what she's accomplished, and the path that she's taken has not always been easy. Miss Ashley-Fontainne is an award-winning and international best-selling author. She enjoys stories that immerse the reader deep into the human psychic and the monsters lurking within each of us. And I've read her books, and ladies and gentlemen, that is a very, very true statement. Her short thriller entitled Number 75 touched upon the sometimes dangerous world of online dating. Number 75 took home the bronze medal in fiction and suspense at the 2013 Reader's Favorite International Book Award contest and is currently in production for a feature film. It may already be done by now. I think it is. Her paranormal thriller entitled The Lie Well, we will talk about that one, too. It won the gold medal in 2013 Illumination Book Awards for fiction and suspense. And, ladies and gentlemen, it has already, if I'm not mistaken, been released in a feature film titled Foreseen. Ashley delved into the paranormal with a Southern Gothic horror suspense novel entitled Growl, followed by the suspenseful Christian mystery Empty Shell. Then she teamed up with Lillian Hansen, Ashley calls her second mom, calls her mom because that is her mom, to pen a 3-part murder mystery suspense trilogy entitled the Magnolia Series. The first book, Blood Ties, was released in 2015. 2 other mystery thriller works that she's released, Whispered Pain and Night Court in 2016. She penned her first romantic suspense, Suicide Lake, and since then she has written over 20 books, ladies and gentlemen, and tonight we're going to talk about a few of them. In fact, one she just released is totally out of her comfort zone, and I can't wait to talk about that one. But we are not even going to discuss it yet because we're going to do some catching up. Hello, my darling. How are you?
Hello. I'm wonderful. How are you? And first off, I'd like to say congratulations on your great numbers on your show. I'm proud of you as well because, boy, you have built it up and you've got those listeners out there, and it's a wonderful tool that you allow us indie authors to use to get our names out there. And thank you very much for allowing me to be a guest tonight.
Oh, honey, it's not a show without my Ashley. we've been down the road together a while.
Yes, I know, almost 6 years.
Has it been? I knew it was at least 5, but Lord, we're looking at the north side of 10 now.
That's right.
Jeez. It's hard to believe that we have been friends for that long. Right when you published the first series that you published that I read that I wanted to throttle the protagonist. I wanted to just beat her half to death.
Yeah, that's been a long time ago, and it's hard to believe that next month it will be 6 years since I released that book. A lot has happened between now and then.
Really, a whole lot. And,
yeah.
and ladies and gentlemen, Ashley at one time had her own radio show as well, and I appeared on her show a couple of times, and we just formed a bond because she's Southern like I am, and when we say bless your heart, it's not always a compliment, is it, darling?
No, it's not. No, it's not. Just like when someone asks you how you're doing and you say fine as frog hair, that could be good or bad.
I'm telling you. And ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't read her short story, Fine as a Frog Hair, you have to read it because it is, I have to tell you, she released that little story right after my father died. And when she put it up, I felt like that I had gotten word from my father because I would call him up and I'd say, Daddy, how are you? And he'd say, I'm fine as a frog hair. And Ashley, if you don't care, can I play that little 1-minute clip that you sent me to play?
Oh, go ahead, right ahead. Go right ahead.
Since we're on the subject, hold on. I'm going to play this because, ladies and gentlemen, I want y'all to read this book. It's amazing.
Fine as Frog Hair by Ashley-Fontainne, narrated by Homer V. Jones. Can the past heal the future? 90-year-old Marvin Hermish is determined to find out. After sneaking out of the retirement home on a hot and humid Sunday afternoon, Marvin embarks upon a journey. His memory is deteriorating fast, and he's having difficulty recalling the face of his deceased wife, Ruthie. As a short-term memory slips, it awakens memories buried deep from his younger days and vivid nightmares of his youth, including the horrors of World War II. Armed with an empty journal, some water, and his trusty old truck, Marvin heads to his childhood home in the backwoods of Grant County, Arkansas, for one last journey, one final battle. Marvin fights to regain control of his mind and body by confronting the tragedies of the past in hopes of healing the future.
Gosh, I just get so choked up every time I hear that. He did such a great job.
Fine as frog.
Well, he makes you visualize this 92-year-old man who knows that he's getting Alzheimer's and knows he's dying and wants so bad to remember the good times.
Exactly.
The man is he's such a magnificent reader. And then I read the book after, and I'm going, oh, please, somebody find this man before he goes off and dies and nobody knows it.
Yeah, I remember when I was searching for a narrator for that book because, it's very short, and it is an ode to my grandfather, and that was his name, was Marvin Hermish. And so when I loaded it up on ACX and I was looking for narrators, of course, I wanted to find an older gentleman that had a very distinct voice. And when I heard Homer's samples that he had on Audible, I was just blown away. And so I immediately contacted him and said, would you mind? I know this is a short story. It's less than 20,000 words, but it's very important to me because it's basically my grandfather's life. And when he sent the first sample clip, oh, my gosh, I cried for 10 minutes. And then I sent it to my mom because, of course, the story was about her father. And she cried. And so we knew that we had the right person. And he nailed the character better than I could have ever even dreamed. And, it hasn't sold very well, but I didn't care. I wrote it, like I said, as an ode to my grandfather and to everybody out there that is coming to the end of their journey here, especially when they are afflicted with something that causes their memory to not be what it used to be, and they're trying to reflect on their life and realizing that it's almost over. And, of course, they go back over the things that happened in their past, which most people that have memory issues can't remember what just recently happened, but they can recall things from their youth. And that's exactly what he does when he goes back to his the homestead that he grew up in out in the woods in Grant County, Arkansas. He remembers back to his childhood days and what had happened when he grew up and how hard it was to grow up during the Depression and, all those things. And so it's a short story, but it's a wonderful journey of a person's last few hours on Earth and what they go through and what they think, and I won't tell you how it ends, but it's sad. But it also has happiness to it because he finally found the peace that he was looking for before it was too late.
And the beauty of the story is he accepted his journey.
Exactly. Which
and
we all
course,
have to. We all have to come to that point that it is what it is, and we did the best that we could, and we have to learn to embrace that.
Because if we don't, then we spend our life miserable because we can't find peace before it's too late. I've known people that died miserable because they refused to accept peace, and all they had to do was just say, the things that happened in my life happened. They don't define me. They were defining moments, but they don't define me. I define me.
Exactly. And it the good and the bad is what makes us who we are. It's what molds us and shapes us into the person that we become, and how we deal with the situations, whether they're good situations or, in his case, there was a lot of situations that happened in his life that were very painful and hard to overcome. He overcame them, but at the same time, he didn't always handle the situations that were forced upon him in the way that he wished as he was older that he would have. And so coming to terms with that and forgiving yourself and others that have hurt you along the way is a big part of his journey, because if you don't, when you do go to the next life, you're going to carry all that baggage with you.
Exactly. And that brings us to a couple of things. Before I get into your book, you, like me, had many, many naysayers. You've traveled that rocky pit-filled road like I have. How does it feel to say, I just want to thank you for telling me no?
There are moments when, I'm not going to lie, there's moments that they still hurt. I'm human, just like anybody else. No one likes to be told anything negative. That's just human nature. But I'm also stubborn enough that I took the negative criticism to heart, and with each book that I wrote, I worked on correcting some of the things that people had mentioned. And, you know, again, and you and I have talked about this before, 6 years ago, when all this happened and I wrote my first book, it never occurred to me to even write a book. It all came about by a challenge from a college professor when I was actually going to school to be a nurse. So I was very naive and very rough around the edges. I like to credit Betty Dravis, who is an absolutely wonderful mentor, who looked through the dirt and debris that was there and saw the gem that was hidden, and has kind of coached me and helped me to craft things better and be able to write better and express what is going on in the characters better. And I've done that. And, you know, it's finally gotten to the point where I'm happy to say that I know this is going to sound silly to some people, but for me it was personal validation when I got a New York agent and sent them a manuscript of a book that I had just finished about 8 months ago called Suburbia Made Me Do It. And it was something that I've never written before. It's a dark comedy, which is way out of my genre comfort zone. And when it got picked up by HarperCollins in the UK, I almost fainted from shock when I got the email because, like I said, for me, that was personal validation that one of the big six was interested in my work. So it made me, that was, I think, the first time, even though I've been doing this for a long time, I really think that was the first time I realized, you know what, I can write. I do have that ability. And I know that's silly because, you know, I've got hundreds of reviews and I've sold a lot of books, but there was just that moment of just kind of sitting back and embracing it all, thinking, wow, I can't believe this is where I've come after 6 years of all of this, you know. So it was very humbling, and at the same time, I do thank those naysayers that, you know, they could have pushed me to say, forget it, I'm not doing this anymore. But again, I'm stubborn enough that I was like, you know what? There's a reason why people review my books. There's a reason why people buy them, because there is something there. So I just need to learn to hone it a little bit better, which is what I did. So thank you, naysayers. You pushed me to the point where, you know, HarperCollins likes me, so there we go.
And the beauty of it, Ashley, is those same naysayers, and you and I both have had haters, and I've learned to laugh at them, because even if we never got any further than we are right now, we succeeded because we did something. The naysayers haven't done anything except criticize. Right. So they failed.
I will never forget one of the reviews that was really nasty over the first book that I wrote. Made the comment that there's no way that people in this world are this cruel. And I laughed because there are aspects and characteristics of the characters that are based on real people. And the story itself, although it is fiction, there is a lot of truth to some of the things that happen in the book. And some of the actions of the characters did happen in real life, which is funny because I remember reading that review thinking, I don't know what world you live in, but the real world, people are nasty and ugly. That's just the way they are.
and so the book didn't tell half of how nasty people can and are.
I know.
Especially women. I mean, I don't know why they feel they have to be that way, but you nailed the nastiness to a T. It was like watching a movie of reality when I was reading that book, and I'm going, oh, my word, I can't believe she's going back into that.
Yeah, I know. And it is funny, you know, in all the years that I've, in my real life, you know, with my real job and everything, you know, I've worked for men and women both, and I much prefer working for men. than I do for women, because women tend to be, especially women that are in positions of power, tend to be catty and very negative to other women, because I don't know if it's because they view them as a challenge to their authority, or they're worried that this person may take over. I really can't really answer why that is, but I experienced it personally and watched kind of from the sidelines and saw some of the really ugly, nasty side of women, and thinking, you really, aren't we supposed to be a sisterhood? At what point did you veer from that and go off over there?
And it's lack of self-confidence and lack of self-respect. And I've had one woman boss in my entire life, and I swore I'd never have another one. And she, if the devil were to be on earth, it would be her.
Oh, I hear you. I've been there.
Like you, I'd much rather work for a man, because I can go in there and he and I can have it out, and then we'll be fine.
Yeah, they're much more cut and dry, and there's tends to be not a lot of trickery. They're very black and white. This is what I need done. Get it done, and then we're done. As opposed to women tend to have hidden agendas and their own deals. And I am a woman. It's not anything negative against womanhood in general. It's just in the workforce, we tend to become different creatures than what we are at home. And it's not just in the workforce either. It's in nonprofit organization. It's everywhere where you have a group of women that are vying for attention, for power, for vilification, validation, and instead of just being true to themselves, they lie to themselves as well as try to manipulate, stipulate, walk over, stab in the back other women because it furthers their agenda. And a very wise boss I had one time, he said, Yvonne, be careful whose toes you step on going up, because those are the same people that you will fall over coming back down. Yep, and that is so true. It was so true. Unfortunately, some people don't ever learn that. But in the trilogy that I wrote, the Eviscerating the Snake series, several of the people that were involved in those type of issues did learn the lesson.
Yeah, they did. A very valuable. Ladies and gentlemen, if y'all have not read the Eviscerating the Snake trilogy, I would ask you to go. No, you cannot order it now. You have to order it later after the show, because we're just getting started. Now, let's talk about the book Ruined Wings, why you wrote it, and what has happened since it was published, and the reason this book and the thing afterward is more important now than ever.
Well, Ruined Wings is about opiate addiction, and I wrote the book through the eyes of a female character who is a young 17-year-old athlete named Callie Novak. And, of course, the book is set in Arkansas, but the movie, which, by the way, it is being made into a movie, is actually being filmed in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. So they have changed. She's no longer in Arkansas and a runner. She is in Colorado and a skier. But it does not change the core of the story. Like so many nowadays, she is a normal, everyday person who has pushed her whole entire life to sports. That's her thing. Her main goal, she has a twin brother named Caleb, and he is more of an artsy, a painter, an artist, and has a lot of issues of his own. And her goal in life, the book starts out with her getting ready to run the final heat for the race for the 1,600 meters, knowing that if she wins and breaks the state record, that she's guaranteed a scholarship to college. Her plan is to have her own free ride so that way her brother can also attend college and her parents will not be forced to have to pay for 2 children in college at the same time. At the very beginning of the story, she's getting ready for that. She's waiting for the final heat. She looks up in the stands and realizes that only her mother and her boyfriend are there. Her father and her brother, who are her 2 biggest supporters, are not in the stands. And she gets this really strange sense of something is wrong, and it turns out she was right. She wins the final race and actually does break the state record, which is a wonderful thing for her to happen, and it's a goal she was working towards. But then she finds out that her brother and father were killed in a car accident. And the car accident happened because her brother had been driving, and she did not know it, and neither did any of the other family members, but he was addicted to heroin and was high when he was driving. So it sends her off into a tailspin because she's dealing with all this grief, and then the grief of her mother, who has not only lost a child but has also lost her spouse, and everything that comes from that, from the accident and, you know, the legal matters that come into the play after someone has had an accident and they were intoxicated. So she's really struggling with trying to deal with this, and her whole life she has been completely against. I mean, she doesn't even take aspirin when she has a headache, but she had this connection with her brother because they were twins, and that broken connection is about to break her. And she has a moment of weakness when she takes the medication, and unfortunately that moment is what triggers her to become an addict. And she ends up going down the same path that her brother did. And that was kind of what I was trying to push in this story, was addiction can happen to anybody, even somebody who their entire life has been completely against it. That one moment that you taste it, if you have the genetic function to be an addict and don't know it, just like you don't know you're a diabetic until something triggers it, or that you have cancer until something triggers it. It's the same way with addicts. That moment that they taste it, they become addicted. And so, of course, her life spirals out of control, and the rest of the book is about what happens to her, that her wings are ruined after what all occurred after the death of her brother and her father. The story is very personal to me because I have a loved one who is a recovering addict who started out using painkillers after a sports injury when he was in high school. And as the crackdown on opiates, painkillers started in our society, the side effect of that was heroin became a big problem. And it is a huge problem in not just our nation, but in the entire world at the moment. Heroin addiction and opiate addiction is destroying our civilized fabric, one addict at a time. It affects everything. It affects all of us. Even though you may not have an addict in your family, you are still affected by it, from people that are arrested that do crimes because of drugs, the overcrowding in jails and prisons because of drugs, the money that is spent on recovery and addiction, houses where people go to get help, all of that, this all. And it, for me personally, I wrote it because I wanted people to see the dangers that lurk out there. And, you know, I never thought in a million years, in all the years that, sorry, I'm trying not to get a little emotional here. I never thought that this would be something that I had to deal with, just like no one does. And when it came and it knocked on the door in my family, it destroyed a lot of things. And my hope with writing the book, and now with this movie that is being filmed, is that it will touch the hearts of people that either A, are addicts and it will guide them to get help, or B, it will be a warning beacon to those who have yet to succumb to temptation to not ever get to that point. I've already had some success with that. I've actually had several people. I did several blog posts on my blog about the entire addiction process, and really from the viewpoint of the family members that loved an addict and how to try to have to deal with all of that. I've had several people that have commented and posted that on the blog that had they not read the book, they would have never gotten help. and that they have recently gone through rehab and are now recovering. So it makes the pain of writing that book worth it all, knowing that I could somehow reach out and touch other people through the words that I wrote. And, as an author, that's what we try to do. And, yes, there is an entertainment value to our books, and most of my books have been written for that. But this book was different. This book was written from the heart, and it was written for the specific fact of trying to help other people that are suffering with this, because it is something that a lot of people in our society deal with on a daily basis. And I really wanted people to take a step back and realize how difficult it is to live with someone that you love that's an addict, and how difficult it is for the addict, because they suffer a tremendous, when they get help and they get clean, they suffer a tremendous amount of guilt when their mind is clean and they start looking back over the things that they've done. It's really difficult for them to stay sober, not just because of the addiction to the drug itself, but because of the pain. That's why they started doing drugs to begin with, is to numb the pain. And when they're confronted with having to deal with the pain that they've caused not only themselves but others, it tends to trigger them to fall back into addiction. So I really hope that that those that have those struggles will take the time. The book is free. It's on Amazon. It's on every website available for books. It is not anything but free, because I really want people to read this and get help. So that was a lot of rambling.
No, and every time you were making a statement, I'm thinking in my head, I'm gonna throw this one at her, and you touched on everything that I was thinking about, especially the fact that with an addict or an alcoholic, every day is a challenge to stay clean and sober. Every hour. You can't even break it down to every day. They go from minute to minute, then from hour to hour, and I think very seldom do they get day to day.
They can, but it takes a tremendous amount of will and strength and a lot of support from not only their family, but sometimes, especially as in the case of the book Ruined Wings, sometimes that help comes from an outside source. And a lot of, in my personal life with my addict, that's what happened. Sometimes when you're so close to someone, you really can't help them, and because of your relationship is so strong and you're so close, you can't step back and see them for anything but who they've always been in your life. And it requires someone who is an outside third party that doesn't have that necessarily that emotional connection, that comes in and says, okay, wait a minute, let's deal with these issues. And that's what happens in the book, and that's what happened in my life. It took some events that led up to my addict finally realizing that he needed help, and then it took outside influences to make that happen and for him to talk to, because he couldn't really talk to me about it because of our emotional connection.
And this it used to be one of the dirty little secrets you didn't talk about, which is sad, like abuse, because you get so deep in the weeds, you cannot step back and look at it objectively, because the love is so overpowering. You either want to help him or you want to kill him, and some days it's both. You want to help kill him.
Right.
Because
and that's true. You know, there was a time in our society that I'm sure people did drugs, but the majority of it was hidden. It was tended to be viewed as something that was only a problem of the inner cities, and that only poor people did, or people that were in poverty, or that had no goals for life. And unfortunately, that is not the case. It has moved not just to suburbia, but it has moved to rural areas. It is everywhere. All you have to do is take 5 minutes of research on the internet, and it will literally curl your toes, because it is affecting every area of our society. And, you know, like my mother's generation, you know, she was a teenager during the 60s. And, yes, there was a lot of experimentation with drugs and mind-altering things such as LSD and peyote and mushrooms, whatever it was they did back then when I wasn't alive. Even marijuana was different back then. What is out there now, the majority of it is so much stronger and has such higher addiction capabilities. And especially when you get into the meth thing where people are making drugs that are, their main ingredients are stuff that if you would take them by themselves, it would kill you immediately.
Right.
We are destroying our generation, and their minds aren't just being altered temporarily and then they're clear when they get clean. Some of the narcotics that are out there have long-term side effects and permanent brain damage as a result from ingesting these chemicals. And it is such a sad thing to see how we kind of have been like the frog in the pot of water, that we've sat around and we've seen it happen and we didn't really do anything about it, and we just kind of sat there until the water kept getting hotter and hotter, and the next thing you know, we're boiled. And that's where we are now, because now we're finally realizing, oh, my gosh, this really is a problem, but what do we do about it? So my personal belief in that is we have to stop it before it starts. The drug trade is just like any other business. It's all about supply and demand. If there is no demand, for the drugs, then the supply chain dies. And that's what needs to happen. We need to warn the upcoming and next generations of the dangers of what they're facing, so there won't be a demand and there won't be people out there that are living these and doing these criminal enterprises to handle all the drugs from the shipments to the selling to everything. So there won't be a demand for that, because if it falls away, then they'll find something else to do, or in my personal opinion, hopefully they'll fall off the face of the earth.
We can only hope. We gotta save our future. And before we get so deep in the evening and we run out of time, you, my darling, have released a film because you had your own premiere. Is that correct?
Yes. And it is not out for technically, quote-unquote, public consumption yet. It is making the rounds of all the film festivals. So while it's out doing that, we cannot actually release it and be out. But, yes, my book, The Lie, was optioned for film, and it is finished. It is actually entitled Foreseen. And if you want to see the trailer, it has a website, foreseenmovie.com. And you can see all the cast and the crew that were involved in it, and also the trailer. I could not schedule work for me to be able to actually fly out to L.A. for the premiere, but I did have one of my own here in Hot Springs last month. And let me tell you, that was an experience that I'm sure I will never forget, because it was, as an author, it was so overwhelming to me to sit there and watch people on a screen that I don't know, that are actors, that are saying the words that I wrote. It was very overwhelming, and it was very humbling and exciting, and, my family was there, and a lot of my friends, and, and my boss was there, and it just was one of those moments that you'll never forget. So I'm looking forward to, after this year, after it does the film festival rounds, and hopefully, it will get picked up by a distributor and it will be out there for everybody to see. So pretty excited about that.
Tell our listeners what the book is about so that they can start doing what they normally do when they want to see a film. They start blogging it and carrying on with it, and pretty soon distributors go, wait a minute, we got a sleeper here.
Well, actually, it's kind of funny how the book came to be, because I had already written the trilogy that we talked about, The Eviscerating the Snake, and I had already written number 75. And one morning when I was sitting downstairs actually getting ready for work, I was thinking about all the craziness that comes from being an author, and, what kind of world have I gotten into, and oh my goodness, this is sometimes overwhelming, and I'm not really sure what direction to go next. And I really wanted to write a thriller that had some paranormal aspects to it, but at the same time, I wanted to make people think about the subject matter. And so while I was drying my hair, I remember thinking, what if the words of the author weren't theirs? And that's what sparked the idea. So the premise of the story is you have a 23-year-old woman named Carmen Moncriel who is the world's most renowned writer. She's written more books than anybody. She's had every one of her books made into a movie. She is just this phenomenon. But she's also very sheltered, and she has her moments when she has panic attacks because she's never given an interview because she's very worried about the question that all authors hear, how do you come up with your ideas? Because her ideas come to her when she sleeps at night. And dead authors such as Shakespeare, Dante, things like that, they come to her, and when she wakes up in the morning on her computer's a new book, which she has no recollection at all of writing. So she finally, at the urging of her uncle, who happens to be her publisher, and her mother, who is her manager, she finally caves and gives her first interview. And during the course of the interview, while she's talking to the lady that is interviewing her, she starts to have a panic attack because that question comes up. And as she's looking at the woman, she realizes the woman's face is morphing into all these authors that are dead, and then she hears a voice that says, I've trained you well, go write it. What follows after that is her path of discovering of why she has been having these dreams, who's been visiting her, and what his purpose was for putting these words into her head. The cut and dry version is that she has been groomed by the Antichrist to write the lie that he tells the world. And I won't go any more into it other than that because I'll give too much of it away. But it's scary and it's funny at times. It's one of those stories where it makes you stop and think about the subject matter. And that's really what I was trying to get across, was you never know who your muse is. And you better be careful and make sure you know who they are.
Oh, that is so true. Oh, that is so true. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've never been a writer or an author, the muses are interesting, and they come at some strange times. Yes, they do.
And sometimes they're good, and sometimes they're evil. So you never know.
That is so true. You also have out Whispered Pain, Blood Loss, and Cocktails for 10. Real quick, tell me about those.
Cocktails for 10 is it's 10 full-length novels that I was asked to be part of a group of authors that got together and wrote. We already had books that we were written, and we all contributed one. And so it's 10 full-length novels by 10 different authors that mostly are in the romantic suspense genre. Donna Fasano, Elaine Rayco Chase, E.G. Fox, me, and I'm sorry, I can't remember everybody else at the moment, but so it's over 1,600 pages for 99 cents, so it's a great deal. It just came out yesterday. And my contribution was my book, Suicide Lake, which was the first romantic suspense that I ever wrote. So I was honored to be a part of that and thrilled that they asked me to design the cover, so that was fun. And Whispered Pain is free. It's a short novella about a woman who finds out that she's in a coma, and she finds out how she got there. And when she realizes who put her in a coma, she plots her revenge while she's unconscious, and then when she wakes up, she seeks her revenge. Revenge tends to be a big plot line for me. I don't know what that says about me as a person, but, it does tend to be what I write about. Night Court was the first book that I wrote, struggles with my addict. It was when I was during my anger stage, which all people that love an addict go through several stages dealing with their loved one's addiction. And at that point in my life, I was very angry. So the premise of that story is a mother who has lost her son due to addiction. And her sole purpose in life now, after losing her husband at the funeral for her son, is that she is going to follow the chain and go up the ladder and kill every drug dealer that she can until she can't anymore or gets caught. so she goes completely vigilante and against her normal character, and that was fun for me because it let me release a lot of pain. And anybody that loves an addict and has suffered because of that will understand the feelings and the inspiration behind that. I've also written, I'm a huge fan of the zombie genre, and The Walking Dead is my favorite show. I never miss an episode. And because of what has happened in my life with drugs, not me personally again, but a loved one, I decided to write I'm finishing the 4th novel right now in the series, and it will be the last, a series called the Rememdium Series. The first book is Tainted Cure, and how my zombie apocalypse happens is because of drugs. You have a group of scientists that are working to find a permanent cure for drug addiction, and they succeed after 10 years of trying. Unfortunately, they have a mole in their group that they don't realize until it's too late, and this mole actually works for a El Salvadorian drug cartel, and they steal the formula to cure addiction with the thought process of, well, if this cures drug addiction, then if we tweak it, then we'll make drugs more addictive, which is exactly what they do. Unfortunately, when they're mixing the batch in the jungles of El Salvador, a fungus gets into it, and so when people take the drugs, they immediately turn into zombies, and there goes the zombie apocalypse. So that was my way of saying, hey, people, wake up. This may be fiction, and yes, of course, we don't believe in zombies, but it is my way of saying this is how badly it is affecting our society, that it is ruining everything, and we really don't even realize it and wake up before it's too late. So,
well, you're not so far from reality, because I don't know if you remember, but here in Florida, there was a young man who was on some drug, and I can't remember what it was, and he's not the first one that makes them eat people, literally.
Right. Yes.
And he killed a man and a woman by eating them alive.
Yes, I remember. And and it wasn't too long after that happened that I remember sitting on my porch with my husband and my son and telling them, we were talking about The Walking Dead. And it was the one thing about that show that irritates me is that they never tell you exactly how it happened. It's always, what happened afterwards. And I said, I'm going to write a zombie series that is based on drugs. That is what causes a zombie apocalypse. And they both rolled their eyes and looked at me like I'd lost my mind. And maybe I had. I'm not sure. But to me, it made sense. And it allowed me to deal with that whole drug trade and how it works and how callous and cold these people are and their willingness to sacrifice everything for money and how that affects the general population, which is exactly what happens in the books. So, it was another release for me. Ruin Wings was the last book that I've written, and the most recent one that deals with the drug issues. And I think I'm to the point now where I've gotten all my angst out about that, which is why Suburbia made me do it, which is completely out of my comfort zone. Came next, which is a dark comedy about a housewife who has lived her entire life being the serene, normal housewife that, we all picture. And a series of very catastrophic events happen in her life, and she snaps and goes on a killing spree. I think part of your synopsis was you graduate from, let's see, you go to high school, you marry your high school sweetheart, check. You have 3.5 children, check. And you went down this checklist, and then all of a sudden you said, bam, she just goes off the rails. Right. And she does because of a series of events that happen. But, yes, she lives by what she calls the Suburbia rule book, that is a mental rule book that was passed down to her from her mother. And, she's tried her entire life to follow all these rules of, you have so many children, you live in this kind of society, you do these kind of things. But her whole entire life, she's always been a very dark person, but she's learned to hide it. But the story opens up with, she's the oldest sister of 3 girls, and she is at the funeral for her young baby sister, who she actually loved. She cannot stand her middle sister. They hate each other. But she loved her baby sister. And so while she's sitting there thinking about all this and going through the motions of the funeral, you know, her mind is wandering about, all my life I've lived by these rules and look what has happened and whatever. And then a series of events happen after that finally push her over the edge. And all her dark fantasies that she's had her whole entire life that she's hidden finally end up breaking free. And as she says, I tossed the suburbia rule book aside and decided to live by a new set of rules, Roxy's rules, because that's her name, Roxanne. And it's really funny. There's even a chapter, and every woman that has ever been cheated on is going to love this book. I will tell you that her husband is a professor, and she, after the death of her sister, the very next day, she's at home, and her daughter has gone to work, and her husband has gone to work as well, so she's home by herself like usual. And she gets a visit from a girl named Ginger. And Ginger is pregnant, and it happens to be she's pregnant with her husband's child. And that really sends her over the edge. And so the next chapter is called 50 Shades of Ginger. And what she does to her husband when he gets home from work is absolutely hysterical. When I was writing it, I had to stop several times because I was laughing so hard and thinking, oh, my God, she's just an evil, crazy person. But it was so much fun to see her transformation of this woman who has worn this facade her entire 40-plus years on this earth of being this serene housewife that's kept everything running, and she's been, you know, the homeroom mother and the sports mom that drove her kid back and forth, and now things are changing because her child is getting ready to go to college, and her sister, who she loved, is dead and has left her with, you know, the other sister that she can't stand, and still trying to keep that facade. But as things keep happening and chunks start getting knocked away, her real persona comes out, and when it does, it's really funny. It's dark, but it's really funny.
That is on my to-read list. Definitely on my to-read list.
Well, I'm very excited. From my understanding, you know, that is the book that was picked up by HarperCollins in the UK. And from what I've understood from my editor, it's supposed to be released in September. I'm waiting. Supposedly in the month of June, I should be getting the cover. And as soon as the cover comes out, then, of course, obviously I'll start the marketing campaign for it. But I'm really excited about that, and it was quite an honor to be picked up by such a prestigious company. But it never occurred to me that they would pick up something that a book that is completely out of my comfort zone and in a genre that I normally don't write in. And I have to thank, I hope she's listening, I have to thank Rebecca Roberts for giving me the idea, because she's narrated several of my books. And as a matter of fact, she's narrated all the zombie series. She's narrated Blood Loss or Blood Ties, and she's going to narrate Blood Loss. And we were talking about it one day on the phone, and she said, you know, you have a really dark sense of humor, and you let it fly every now and then in the books that I've narrated for you, but that's not your main genre. But she said, you should write a completely dark comedy about a suburban housewife that goes off the rails. And I remember laughing and thinking, yeah, right, that's going to happen. But the idea started from her words, and then all of a sudden it was just like, oh, my God, there's Roxy's character. Okay. So, you know, Roxy took over my brain for several weeks, and I literally pounded out the story in less than a month. And when it was done, I sent it to Rebecca for her to read, and she immediately called me the next day and said, oh, my God, I laughed so hard I cried. So I knew I had something, but it just never occurred to me that, hey, I guess I could be kind of funny, you know.
You are funny.
Apparently I can. So.
And believe it or not, my beautiful friend, we are running out of time.
Oh, my goodness, already?
Yeah, see, so now you got to come back. So I'm going to have you come back in November, if that's okay with you.
That works for me.
Because I love having you come on the show. So I'm going to put you down for November. So you heard it first here, ladies and gentlemen. Miss Ashley's coming back in November. And until that time, tell the lovely folks where you can be found.
Well, all of my books are on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, everywhere. You can find links to all of them at my website, which is ashley-fontainne.com. That also has a trailer to not only Foreseen, but also Ruined Wings. Ruined Wings, also, by the way, we are using, I'm going to say this wrong, GoFundMe to help fund the costs of production. We are halfway through our goal, so if you want to take a look at it, you can click on it there. Of course, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, all of that you can find on my website. My blog is also on my website as well, so if you want to read anything about addiction, if you have someone in your family that is suffering from that, or you are, please feel free to go there and peruse around some of the posts, and I hope that it makes a difference in your life or someone that you love. And if they want to get in touch with me, they can connect with me through my website.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Y'all see why I say she is such a fabulous and lovely, lovely person. It takes a lot of courage for her to talk about someone that she loves that is addicted. But in order to help herself and to help others, she has to. And that is the sign of a very strong woman. And she and I both say we're strong Southern women because we don't back down from conflict, do we, my friend?
No, ma'am. Weeping willows may bend, but they don't break.
No, they don't. We hit it head on. Ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow night I have on my show for the first time author Betty Webb, and then on Saturday night for the first time author Ellen Byron. Both nights will be at 8 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. And join us because you never know what you're going to learn on this show. That's why we call it Off the Chain. And Ashley, my darling, I so appreciate you, and I so thank you for coming on my show and talking about things that are near and dear to your heart. And I can't wait to have you back in November.
Well, thank you for allowing me this opportunity to spread the word because I really do appreciate it. And again, congratulations on all your success, and not only with the show but your books as well. And you have a big thing to talk about, which is your book about Mr. Darnell and what happened with you. So that's awesome because I know that you just had that interview with, what was it, A&E?
No, Investigation Discovery.
Okay, I was close.
Yeah, same thing. Investigation Discovery with about Gerard Schaefer and his victims. They spent 2 days at my house.
That's awesome. Congratulations for being the voice of victims because not very many people are.
No, because they're afraid of it. So, and with that, ladies and gentlemen, this is what I say at the end of every show. And Ashley, don't hang up when we go dark because I'm going to tell you, the normal stuff. And that is, if you have a dream, be it, do it. If your child has a dream, support them, encourage them, help them achieve that dream. If your husband, your spouse, your friend, your parent, husband, whoever you know has a dream, don't be a naysayer because they will prove you wrong every cotton-picking time, ladies and gentlemen, because dreams are made to happen. And as I always say at the end of my show, your smile is your logo, your personality is your business card. How you leave others feeling after having an experience with you, ladies and gentlemen, that becomes your trademark. And if you don't believe it, look around. Also, don't just feel special. Be special. We can all feel special. But if we aren't special, if we don't become special, then it never shows anybody else because we keep it hidden inside. And if you want to achieve success, stop asking for permission. This is Yvonne Mason with Off the Chain. Join us again tomorrow night at 8 o'clock when we will be here with author Betty Webb, and Miss Ashley will be visiting us again. I can't talk anymore in November because she will have more to tell us. So, ladies and gentlemen, dream, make it happen. Because you are part of our future. And with that, I will say good night until tomorrow night. Now, of course, we're off the air now, but when the show archives, I'm going to put it up and tag you in it. So be sure and
okay,
put the
thank you.
links everywhere. And then I'm going to, tomorrow, put it up on SoundCloud, Mixcloud, Spreaker, Podcast Garden, and podcast.com. It already goes up to YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, FM.com, TuneIn Radio, Google Play. It's now up on Google Play, and some places I've never even heard of.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you, darling. And so y'all are heard in over 64 countries.
Wow, that's awesome. Woohoo!
Yep. So you're gonna,
while we have a moment, I want to read something to you, just for a second.
Okay. Now, all right. Now you know this is going to be heard in the archives, right?
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
In Ruin Wings, when Callie discovers, after her brother has passed away, she goes into his room and she starts digging because she feels really guilty that she didn't realize that he was going through all of this and that he was an addict. And she finds several things in his room, and one of them is his journal. And in the journal, she finds several poems that he's written, and all of these poems that are in the book are actually poems that my son wrote. And, yes, my son is the addict. And I really wanted to bring this out because this is the struggle that addicts deal with every day. And the poem that he wrote is called The Path of Truth. I can't find my way, lost en route for so long. Without happiness today, God, nirvana will never come along. Overcome by it all, I slide. There is no more fear, no more pride. The monster made it all disappear. Today I quit believing. It lies and gives no favors. It's all about deceiving. These hits are no saviors. If I continue, it will destroy me. It's just a taker that will never set me free. That is the struggle that every addict goes through. And when my son brought me these poems, I cried for hours because of the pain that he went through and the struggle that he had and that he still has and that every addict out there has. It takes over every aspect of their life. And it doesn't matter how much you love them or what kind of life they grew up with, whether they grew up in poverty or they grew up privileged. The monster doesn't care. The monster eats whatever it is allowed to eat. And it is a sad, sad part of our society that happens every day.
And we walk around with our head in the sand and say, it can never happen to me, and it does.
Exactly. And trying to deal with that when you are so not expecting it to be the case, you as the person that loves an addict and the addict themselves is extremely difficult. And unfortunately, we live in a world that glorifies violence. It glorifies drug abuse through music, through movies, through the lifestyles that are lived by people that make their living off basically killing other people. Yep. It has to stop. It has to stop. I don't know how to make it stop, but it has to stop. You
are the voice, my darling.
I sure am trying.
I am the voice for murder victims, and you are the voice for drug addiction.
It's a shame that we have to be the voice for either one of those things. If this is the path that God has led me on, like I know it is with him with you, then so be it.
We will travel that path together, holding hands and holding each other up.
Yes, ma'am.
Because
I agree.
Being the voice is tiring.
Yes,
it's tiring.
Extremely painful. And, that's one thing. I know that you said this is going to be on the podcast and people will hear this later, but that is the one thing that I don't believe that readers really understand out there of how much of ourselves we give out to our stories. How
That's
much
true.
emotional pain and struggle and pieces of ourselves that we lay bare in hopes that it makes a difference in other people's lives, and how much toll that takes on us, not only physically but mentally. Writing this book, yeah, exactly. Writing this book was extremely hard for me because this time I had to come at it from the angle of an addict as opposed to an angry mom. And I wrote that while my son was in rehab, dealing with the issues that he had, trying to understand where he was coming from and how that happened. And, of course, Callie is a fictional character, and what happened in her life is not a mirror of what happened to my son, but it is a mirror of every addict out there, of the struggles that they have. And it was extremely painful and difficult to write, but I am so glad that I did, because I got to tell you, on the GoFundMe campaign that we have one donor that donated yesterday $1,000, because
wow.
the minute they read about it, they were immediately drawn to it, because they just lost 2 family members a week prior because they overdosed. And knowing that that is something that, unfortunately, a lot of us have that commonality of loving an addict, really hit home with me that, complete strangers are hurting because of this and want to do something to make it change. That blew me away.
And something to, and this is going to sound crass, but I don't know how else to explain it. They carry a guilt that doesn't belong to them. And it's some way
yes.
to assuage that unnecessary guilt, because no matter what they did, they could not stop that loved one from doing what they were going to do.
Exactly. And it is, there is a tremendous amount of guilt that that people that love addicts carry with them, especially if it is your child or your spouse, that no matter how much you love them or how much you beg them or how much you plead, how much you yell, whatever you do, it doesn't matter, because that monster is so much more powerful than what we are. And we as non-addicts really don't understand that. We get angry and think, how could you do that? How could you throw this away? How can you do these things? And we have no clue what's going on in their head and how they feel. And it's really humbling to try to take a step back, at least it was for me, and look through it through the eyes of an addict who doesn't want this to be their life. They feel a tremendous amount of guilt and sadness, but yet they're stuck, and they don't know how to get out of this cycle. It's very difficult.
Because the addiction is brought on by pain, then the addiction becomes guilt, then they get clean, then the guilt becomes the addiction, and the addiction becomes the guilt, and they keep digging themselves deeper and deeper because they feel so guilty when they get, like you say, when they get clean as to what they put their family through, that it becomes physical. That becomes the pain then.
Right. And, of course, an addict, once they've tasted it, they know, hey, there's a way to escape this pain. So It is a daily struggle for them to stay clean and deal with life's upheavals, because we all have them, whether we're addicts or not. Life is difficult at times, but an addict doesn't deal with them very well, and they want to numb the pain, and it's so hard to try to encourage them, yes, embrace the sadness, because without sadness you can't have joy. That's something that my son and I are working on right now, that, yes, times are tough, and unfortunately he's paying for the decisions that he's made in his life, and it's a struggle, but at the same time, I keep telling him, use that as personal fuel to not ever go back and have to do this again.
Right.
This will end. It's only temporary. This too shall pass. Once it's over, look back on it and say, okay, lesson learned, go forward.
Make it a learning. Make your as one of my teachers used to say, make your past experience a guidepost and not a hitching post.
Exactly. Yeah, because that's definitely something you don't want to be hitched to.
You are exactly right. I can't wait for November. We will continue
Me
this.
either.
And it will be here before we know it. I will send you a note as soon as I get off the phone and go look at my book and give you a couple of dates, and you tell me what's good for you.
Sure. Because by then, Suburbia will be out, and we'll be laughing at how twisted and sick that I am in dark comedy.
Well, we already know that. But what I would like to do is bring you on every 3 months or so, because I don't think that we can do overkill with your voice.
Not on the subject of addiction, no, because it is something that is so near and dear to my heart. And if I had my way and I could reach out and hug every single person out there that is going through this and tell them there's light at the end of the tunnel, it will be okay, I would. That is why I made the decision to put the book up for free, because I didn't want anybody to not get it because they couldn't afford it. I wanted them to read it and understand there is hope and there is a way to get out of this vicious cycle. And to me, that is so important.
And part of your voice is your son's poems.
That's right. I mean, really, when there's 3 of them actually in the book that she finds, and they are all written by his hand, and they are heart-wrenching. They are a true glimpse into the inside mind of someone that is really struggling. And I will share this with you, that when he wrote these, he felt he was going to die. It was his way of telling me, Mom, I'm sorry. This is what's going on, but I can't do anything about it. And when he gave them to me, my heart broke.
Yep.
You know, it still breaks when I think about it now, about
and this will help. This will help you, honey. This getting all of this out and talking about it over 64 countries and 20,000 plus listeners is cathartic for you.
Yes, it is. And I hope it's a person out there that's going through the same thing, because there are, unfortunately, millions that are suffering with the same issue.
Yep. You are very, very right. So we will talk about Suburbia, and we'll talk maybe read a poem or 2 in November, and read a poem or 2 every time you come back, and we're going to keep getting this word out. And pretty soon you'll be able to talk about it and without, and I will say without emotion, because that's not what I mean. You know what I mean. You'll be able to talk about it without hurting so much, because you're helping.
Exactly. And that's what we should do as humanity. We should do what we have to do to help others with their struggles.
Absolutely. And we all have them. And I am always just either a phone call away or a text away, or, Yvonne, I need to vent, and I would say, call me, and I am here, because you know I am the least judgmental person you know.
That is so true, and I know that. Thank you very much. So thank you for allowing me this opportunity to share about this. I really do appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome, my darling, and I'll send you a thing for November, and we will continue this discussion then, and I'll send you all the podcasts as soon as I get them uploaded.
Okay. Thank you so much, sweetheart. I appreciate it very much.
All right. Love you, darling.
Love you, too. I'll talk to you later, Miss Yvonne.
Okay, honey.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.